Hey everybody, how's it going? We'll wait for a few people to get on. I'll play a little music here. Today we're going to talk about directing, video directing, and I don't know how many of you are video directors, and I'm going to try and talk about both types of directing, whether that be PTZ directing, and I'll try to remember to hit that, where you're just one person who's having to direct everything, or if you're a director who's sitting in a control room and you have a bunch of camera operators and playback people, and that's kind of the whole range. And even if you're a smaller church, that may be your situation, or maybe it's something that you're going to strive to. And we get different levels of broadcast based on the gear that we have. So in the comments here, I think I'm getting all the comments now. There was something on StreamYard earlier that said they weren't getting some comments from some places, but I do see some coming in. Any questions you have, please feel free to get those to me. Also, I'll just warn you, I had an issue with my camera locking up earlier session. Hasn't happened in 2 weeks and did earlier today, but I will try to mitigate that as much as possible. So today we're going to talk about directing, and I've been doing, again, my name is Phil Grimpo, and I've been doing directing for 20 years or more in live events, between small corporate events, or also worship, which is what I've been doing now with the streaming. I'm directing every week. And whether it's one camera or 10 cameras, a lot of the principles are the same. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to get started here. And in directing for broadcast, we're going to talk about your basic setup, the things that you're going to need. We're going to talk about shot composition. I'm not going to get into a whole lot about gear. Later, I plan on doing, it's probably going to be next week. I wanted to do it this week, but it'll probably be next week. I'm going to talk about cameras, what types of cameras, what the different features are for cameras and the uses of them, and also about switchers. There's so many different switchers out there, from cheap $300 up to $40,000, $50,000, $100,000. So we won't probably worry about those, but there's a lot of different price range, and you get what you pay for in a lot of cases. So we'll talk about that. We're going to talk about basic direction, basic principles, and things that you should say, and different shot calls and stuff like that. And we're also going to get into a little bit on engineering. So using waveforms and vector scopes and making your stuff look good. Let me really quick here. I actually just had this lock up, so I'm going to make a quick change here, and then I will come back and we'll get going on with the rest of the PowerPoint. I'm assuming you guys can hear me, but I'm not entirely sure. So if for some reason you can't hear me, I guess just let me know in the comments. All right, so let's move forward here. A basic setup. So you have your switcher, right? Is that the switcher you guys all have? Probably not, but boy, is it gorgeous. I would love to have a switcher that size. A lot of that is just repeating the same stuff that you maybe have on a switcher, and maybe yours looks something more like this, okay? So this is your basic switcher. On most switchers, you're gonna have a preview row on the bottom, and that's gonna typically be green, meaning that's what's coming up. Green, I always want to think means go. That's what is up. It's not. Green, go, that's what you're going to go to next. Red is what's live right now. Stop. Don't hit anything on that row. It is live. So typically in video production, we have a preview. That's what we're going to see next. And we have program. That's what's currently on. And when we hit cut down here, or if we hit auto, it's going to take a transition. And you'll see these two, like right now we have 1 is in program and 2 is in preview. We'll typically see those flip-flop. All of a sudden 2 will be in program, it's live on the screen, and 1 is now in preview. The T-bar here, if you haven't ever used that before, you pull that down, it does a transition. That I use often for slow dissolves. I'm a director who almost always will cut with the cut button, and I'll dissolve with the T-bar. A best practice is to always use your preview and program. Don't hot punch on program. When your fingers get up there and you just say, I want to go to 1, you hit 1, 2, go to 2. The problem with that is sometimes you're on the wrong button. Sometimes someone's not quite ready, and there is just a fraction of a second from when you put them into preview to when you hit go or cut, even if you're going fast, that you could hesitate and stop from making a mistake. So whenever I'm training directors, I say, don't hot punch on the program bus. Always put it into preview first and then hit cut. It's more button pushes, but it can stop some problems. And then when you're cutting together, usually I try and cut to the beat. If I'm cutting together music, I'm trying to hit when there's big hits, when there's big starts. On the 2 and the 4, maybe where there's a drum backbeat, I'm trying to keep it some resemblance of being with the song. And then some other just tips here. I usually, on a fast song, I cut between all shots. I will almost always dissolve in and out of graphics, full-size graphics. If it's a slow song, I'll do a lot of dissolves. And later on, we're going to show a multi-view, and I'm just going to have, I have the comms and us directing a song, and we'll talk through what else is happening there. And then if I'm doing something like a big sweeping shot, like a big crowd shot, a jib shot, a cable cam or something, then I'm probably dissolving in and out of those. I think it just seems to be a lot less jarring, and we'll see some of that later. Another thing on this switcher here, you have a button here called your DSK, or your downstream key. If a lot of you are doing graphics right now where you're chroma keying on the bottom, your text, you're probably using some type of a keyer, and often they'll have a button just dedicated to that. One thing I like about this switcher is that just sits on top of my video. My preview and program rows work just like they normally would. And then in this switcher, we have a couple of other things, like we have an aux bus. An aux bus means I can assign anything that's coming into my switcher to another output. In a lot of setups, we will take our Pro Presenter or our PowerPoint feed, bring that in, put that on an aux bus, and go directly to the screens in the building. Then everything we're switching is just going to a stream or some type of a broadcast outside of the room. So that way we're using the same switcher and we're going to 2 different destinations. And then oftentimes you can take your aux bus, could also be what's on program. So now if I want to bring that baptism in onto the screen, I can just take my aux bus, cut it to program, and now I see that, and then I can cut back later. So those are some things you're probably looking for in a switcher. This one in particular has the advantage of having audio in it. So video is video, but if we're doing a broadcast, we want to have audio in it as well. And cable formats like HDMI or SDI do have the capacity to handle audio, but somehow we have to get those 2 things merged together. Right here in this switcher, it has inputs. It merges the audio and the video into one cable, one signal to go to broadcast. So that's something that's nice about this switcher. Actually, in your bigger format switchers, you often won't see audio. So you have to handle that later and worry about sync issues. Some of these smaller switchers, and when we talk about it in our switcher program, we'll talk about different options that have audio built in. Okay, the next thing you're going to have is a multi-viewer. And this is the multi-viewer that I use. And what we see here is my preview. This is what's coming up next. And on this side is my program. And on the bottom, I have all of my cameras and my sources. I tend to put preview on the left and program on the right. I tend to read from left to right. I think left to right. So this is going to move over to here. It's going to move from the left to the right. That's just how I like to lay out my multi-viewer. Having all your cameras across this way helps us with rule of thirds, which we'll see later. I can see how these shots are going to compose with each other. So that's another thing that's kind of nice. If your switcher doesn't have a multi-viewer, you can get third-party multi-viewers. Blackmagic makes them. Decimator makes them. A lot of different companies make multi-viewers. You just have to find a way that you can split your signal so it goes to your multi-viewer and to your switcher with some type of a video hub router or something. But there's some other roll-in switchers we'll talk about later where they just have a touch screen built right into the switcher and everything's all in one unit. So those are pretty nice. But this is what the director is watching all the time. Okay, so we're going to talk about shot composition. And in my PowerPoint here, I do have these 2 play buttons. And these play buttons aren't anything that we're going to look at today, but I will put this PowerPoint and make this available. And these play buttons are some other resources that you can watch online. And I have also, if you go to the ChurchNeXt .online website, I'm going to have all these resources listed with this webinar. So you can take a look at that. So shot composition, rule of thirds. Basically, you divide your screen up into a tic-tac-toe board of thirds, a top third, lower third, center third, right, center, and left. And the way we'll typically use this top third is where our eyes go. So like you'll see in this shot here, his eyes are at the 1/3 shot. So if the person is looking dead into the camera, I'll try to do this on my camera, dead into the camera, we're going to keep him pretty much centered. But if I'm looking off this way, I'm going to want to move myself to this other side of the frame. So if you can see this, if I'm looking this way, I'm going to be in this side of the frame. So I give some looking room over here, or vice versa over in this. If I'm looking this way, I'm going to put myself on this other third. If I'm looking dead into the camera, I'll be center then. Okay. So that's how we use the rule of thirds. And I'll show some pictures of that later. Typically, my eye line, I don't want that to change very much. When we talk about lower thirds, that's stuff we're putting in the lower third portion of the screen. We also will talk about headroom. I don't want to have his eyes in the middle. If his eyes are in the middle, we have all this extra headroom on top. We want to get rid of that. So eyes on this third line, often I'll cheat them up a little bit higher like they did here. And I have two videos here. Sorry, you're not seeing my cursor, are you? I have two videos here that are talking about composition for rule of thirds. So you want to take a look at those. Okay, the next piece here in shot composition is in complementary shots. So what we want to do is create shots that aren't going to go right on top of each other. So if I look at this picture of our pastor here, I have a shot from the left and the right side. I don't want them to go directly over him. It's almost like he morphs into a person who's looking straight to a person who's looking sideways. I don't want to have that morph or that cut. Kind of feels like a jump cut if you've done post-production. So we don't want a jump cut or anything. So what we're going to do, and I can blow this up here a little bit, is here's my shots. So this one, you can see the podium is centered, even though he isn't necessarily centered. And let me see if I can make this bigger for you guys. Even though he isn't necessarily centered because he's leaning back and forth on his feet, the podium is centered. That's our straight on shot when he looks directly into the camera. On my shot over here, where he's looking to what we see as our right, we're going to frame him over on the left side. And then the opposite of that is this one. When he's looking over here, we're going to frame him to the opposite side. That way, when I go from this shot, my cam 2, to my cam 4, he's going to drop in this negative space right here. So I'm always trying to think ahead. I'm trying to think of what is going to happen next. How do I create some negative space? For instance, if this was a song and I had the singer here in the middle and I want to drop someone else in the middle, I might have to tell my camera person to pan right or pan left to create some negative space. Otherwise, you don't want your lead singer to magically morph into the guitar player. Okay. So we're going to try and create some negative space that I can drop the person into. I hope that makes sense there. If you have any questions, please feel free to say something on the chat. So I'm always thinking ahead. I'm also thinking ahead about what is the last shot. So if I'm doing a song, I usually want to end on a wider shot. Then the pastor can come up and I can go to a close-up of him. So I want to be thinking, let's see, my pastor camera is camera 2. So I need to get over to camera 3 on a wide shot, but right now 3 is on a close-up. So I need camera 1 to take another close-up. I need to have camera 3 get wide so I can go to that, so that frees up camera 2 to get the shot of the pastor coming in. So usually whatever shot I'm on and the shot in preview, I've already thought of those. I'm thinking about the third shot in the sequence. So always be thinking ahead of where you want to go. And this is where the producer role comes in. Now, when we talk about roles, usually I'm the director and the technical director. The technical director is the guy pushing the buttons. The director is the guy calling the shots. The producer is the person looking over the whole program. In our situation, usually the person acting as producer is our pro presenter person. They have the script in front of them. They know everything that's going on. So the producer is telling me how many verses do we have left. They may be telling me a guitar solo is coming up. So I'm thinking of those things. Otherwise, maybe the director is doing that. So if you have some of those people in your ear, it does help you plan ahead. All right, let's move forward here. Some basic directing terms. And in this video, I may play a little bit of this video coming up just because I can show some of these. These are things that maybe a pet peeve of mine. Zooming, you zoom in, you zoom out. I may also use terms like push or pull. So you're going to push in, you're going to pull out, or you're going to tighten or loosen the shot. So those may be things that I say, and what I'm saying is I want you to zoom. You never zoom right, you never zoom left. You never pan in, you never pan out, okay? So it is kind of good to know what these terms are. The next term, panning, is left and right. Usually we refer to this as audience left or right, or so that our camera person knows we're moving to his left or his right or her left, her right, not stage right, stage left. I just don't want to confuse a lot of the camera operators. So typically, and if I'm with new people, I'll say, when I say left and right, I'm referring to your left and your right, audience left and right. So you pan left and right, you tilt up and down. So you don't tilt right or left. You don't pan up and pan down. You tilt up and down. And the other one is rack focus, which is where you shift your focus. And we'll see some of that in a video I'm going to show you in a little bit. Some other terms are boom. If you're using a jib, most of you probably aren't, but if you're using a jib, you boom the camera up and down. Now, jib is a little bit different, that as you come up, it actually kind of swings backwards. So booming is different than a pedestal up or down. Pedestals where the camera just moves up or down. These are things that typically our cameras don't have. The top pieces, most of our cameras have that. Even if it's a PTZ, you have that. But these bottom ones are if you have more complex shoots, and you're probably using these more in post-production than in live event. Trucking or tracking is when you're moving the whole camera on a slider right and left. Dolly is in and out, or forward and backward. And then Dutch is something we haven't seen in a long time, but Dutch is when you roll the camera clockwise or counterclockwise, and I may say roll left or roll right. So let me see if I can just play this video a little bit here. Yes, I want to open this in Chrome. Okay. So I'm going to show you a couple of these movements, and just to show you the different. The zoom one, for whatever reason on this site, it doesn't work. But if we were to look at panning, panning is different than trucking left or right, because we can tell that the camera is fixed in one center position and it's panning right or left, right? If I were to scroll down here and I were to look at trucking, the difference when you truck is much more cinematic. We're not panning right or left where we have a central point. We're moving the whole camera. It has a more cinematic look. That's one thing that differentiates what we do with what you see in Hollywood, is they are often using some prime lenses where they're not zooming in or out. They are moving the camera forward or backward, or moving the whole camera right or left. So tilting is when the camera tips up, and that shot is going to look very different than down here where I believe we have one of pedestal where the whole camera moves up. So that's just to show you the difference. I'd say your camera people should know these terms. Also with my camera people, I will tell them, I expect you to be able to focus a shot, be able to frame a shot. I shouldn't have to spend my time with saying less headroom, move them to the right side of the frame, move them to the left side of the frame, make sure you're in focus. I want them to have those skills, and then I want them dishing me or serving me shots, giving me ideas as a director, so I don't have to tell them everything to do. Directing, there is a part of telling people what you want, but also it's picking the shots, and creative camera guys can get you some good stuff. So give them the freedom to experiment. Now, a lot of these terms here you're going to use if you have a live camera person. For those of you who are switching with PTZ cameras, it's very different, because in a PTZ, typical, and what I mean by PTZ is a robotic camera, typically you're not trying to pan or zoom or anything live. The robotics just aren't good enough in the little orb type cameras. So in that situation, you are doing this Tower of Hanoi thing where you're saying, I need to set up shot one. I go to shot one. While shot one's live, I set up shot two. Then I go to shot two. Then I come back to shot one. I set it up, and then I go to that. So you're thinking back and forth. And typically you're doing a wider shot to a tighter shot so you don't have some jump cuts. So it does take some thinking up ahead, probably more thinking than if you have more cameras. The more cameras I have, the more flexibility I have. Another thing I will typically do when I'm directing is leave what I call as a dump shot. So some type of a wide shot of the room that even if it's not a PTZ and it's just sitting there, that I can always, if I've got nothing else, I can just show the room while I reset some shots. Sometimes I'm directing and I say, wow, all the camera operators have basically the same frame shot of the lead singer. I can't do anything with that. I don't want to go from one to the next. So I need something to bail out on. In that case, one thing I try to tell my camera operators is, if you're doing image magnification in the room, what you're going to do is say, look at the screen. So if I can go back here and take a look at this shot, if I see that on the screen is this shot right here on camera 2, I'm going to think of what shot do I have that will complement that. So I kind of want my camera operators to be thinking about that. Now, if you're not doing IMAG, it may be worth investing in a way for them to have a monitor by their cameras where they can see what you're directing and they can figure out complementary shots. In a bigger camera system, just so you know, the camera operator has a button on his hand, and when he or on his grip, and when he triggers that, it changes his monitor to see program and see what the director is seeing. So in a bigger situation, if you're thinking about how people do it live in sports and whatnot, that's how they come up with those shots. Sometimes we have a disadvantage that we don't have that type of equipment. So this last week, what I did is on my Jib operator, I had him, we knocked in another monitor, and he has a monitor of seeing what's on program at all times, so he can try and come up with something complementary. So that's something definitely that you can consider doing. Just some small, cheap monitors. They don't need to be really expensive, just something for reference. Okay. Before I get too far, if you guys have any questions, be sure to let me know. I don't know if I'm getting all of the comments from everywhere. It looks like I'm probably not getting the ones from my Facebook page or from the ChurchNeXt. But if you're on the, if you go to ChurchNeXt.online and go to the YouTube or to the Inspire Media Productions Facebooks, I think those ones I am getting the comments from. So just so you know, if you've been sending comments, I maybe haven't been seeing those. I'll try to find a way that I can log in and see some of that stuff as well. Okay, so let's take a look at what I'm talking about as I'm directing. And one of the things that I'm always doing is communicating with people as much as possible. So I'm wanting to talk about countdowns. If you saw, and we'll show it later, my multi-view screen, I see a countdown of every video that's playing, and I can say we have 45 seconds left. We have 30 seconds left, 15, 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, going to my next camera. Before the service, if you do a countdown on your service, and when it hits 0, you better be going to something. Otherwise, there was no point in having a countdown. If I'm not seeing that stuff, then I'm asking my playback person to give me a countdown. I want a 1 minute, a 45, a 30, a 15, a 10, and a 5 down to 1. So they're counting in my ear, so I know how much time is left. One thing with the video playback like that then is sometimes the countdown to 0 is not the end of the video, because when you, yes, Adam, I am getting your comments. So that is great. When the video goes to 0, maybe there was 3 seconds of black on the end. So you're going 5, 4, and it's done. Before the event, I like to see all the videos and make a note of how quickly do they get out, or what's the last frame of that video. So I know how to, as that video is going out, I'm dissolving or I'm cutting to something else. So there's not dead air. Okay. So some other directing commands I'm going to say is standby. And what standby means is before I take any camera, and even if I'm just directing PTZs and I don't have camera operators, I'm either saying this or I'm thinking this in my head: standby 1, take 1, or standby 1, dissolve to 1. Okay. I will tell people beforehand whether I'm on fast takes or whether I'm on dissolves or slow dissolves, so they can think. I will always try to say standby and then take. And if people don't have tally lights, and what tally lights are is a light that tells the talent and tells the operator that they're live. It's a red light that turns on. I'll try and mention this when we talk about switchers and cameras. There's some systems that you can probably use even wirelessly with your switcher system. Very, very nice to have. Helps a lot with your camera operator so they know. But if I don't have tallies, then when I go from camera 2 to camera 1, so standby 1, take 1, 2, you're clear. Especially on dissolves. I'm dissolving to 1, 2, don't take off yet, because it takes me maybe 1 second, 2 seconds to get that dissolve. Then I'll clear that other camera, and that means that they're off and they can go find another shot. Sometimes I'll say take 1, but the beat wasn't quite right. So then I want to make, I hit it a second later. I don't want the camera operators moving too fast. So to give them a light kind of puts it on them. If that red light was on, you were still live. No matter what you thought you heard in your head or what I said, you were still live. So it just helps everybody if you have those tally lights. I will always try to, even if, like I said, even if it's not a camera that has a live person, I'll try to talk it through just so I get in the habit. So if I'm directing somewhere else, I'm used to talking through all the shots. Okay. All right. The next section we're going to do here, I'm hoping this is going to play well, is we're going to take a look at a little bit of a video demonstration. And this is a multi-view from this last week, and I'm just going to walk it. It's a bit long, but I'll make this full screen, and we're just going to go through something where we're directing and we're listening to what the director is saying. And in this case, we have the music piped in. All I have, this is just a feed right off my comms. Feel free to ask any questions you have, and I will also try to narrate through this kind of what we're thinking. So we'll try this out here.
Go into keys, 5.
Oops, sorry. So right now, the lights are very dark. You can see on the stage. And there's two reasons for this. So I'm just trying to find some light right now.
Going to 3.
And the issue was we didn't have enough
on 2. Do we have some? There we go.
We didn't have enough iris open. So we thought that the lights weren't up. They were up. We just didn't have the irises open on the cameras. So in this situation, I have an engineer sitting next to me, and he can be adjusting all the light on the cameras remotely. Otherwise, I'm talking to my camera operators and telling them to adjust them. In this particular situation, we're doing a picture-in-picture here because all of our slides are created already. We didn't know how long COVID was going to go, so we went with picture-in-picture rather than recreating all the slides. So that's why we're doing it this way.
3 started over.
So there, 3 showed me a shot. I saw it. I want him to do it over again. I tell him to start over, and then I'll take it when I'm ready.
Going to 3.
So here we're on very slow dissolves. In my multi-view, you can see over here, and actually down on the bottom, I have countdown clocks and what slides are coming next. I'm seeing all that coming off a Pro Presenter.
Stand by 2. Coming to 2. Stand by 3. Go ahead, 3. On to 3. Stand by 1. Go to 1. Stand by 2. Stand by 4. Then I'll come to 2. I'm going to drop it in the center. Go to 2. 1, stay there. Let me figure out how we can get
So
there.
here I saw 1, and 1 was going to go right on top of Matt. So I said I'm going to go to 3, get a wide shot, and then I can come back to her.
Stand by 1. Going to 1. 1, when I come out of you, I want you to roll your focus out. If you can do that.
So here we'll see,
4.
We'll see it blur out.
Roll focus 1. Going to 4. Good job. Thank you. Excellent job. 2, roll out of focus. Now I'll bring you back in. And we're coming into you now. Start to roll in focus. Get there. Great. Thank you. Start to roll out of focus. We're going to go to 3. Go ahead. Great job. Thank you. Stand by 5. Go to 5. Stand by 1. Stand by 6. Go to 6.
Cameras 5 and 6 are just GoPros.
Stand by 1. Go to 1. Stand by on 4. Stand by on 3. Go to 3. Stand by 2. We have someone on the violin. Thanks, 1. Coming to 1.
So that shot I normally wouldn't want to have had them stacked on top of each other. It came up kind of fast.
Coming back to 2.
If you have to stack them on a slow song on top of each other, that blurring trick helps a lot.
Coming up 3. So if you get out, then I can use 4 again, but stay there is fine.
So in this situation, we have the jib is in here in the shot of 4. So I know I've got to get him out of the way before I can use 4. So now I see that jib lift out. Now I know 4 is available again.
Coming to 1. I'll come back to you 3 in a minute. Stand by 3. Going to 3. Stand by 1. Going to 1. Stand by 4. Stand by 3. 3 is up. Stand by 1. Going to 1. Stand
Oh, so sorry.
by 4. Going to 4.
I'm lining up for the end shot.
Okay, thank you. Stand by 6. Stand by 1. Stand by 2. Going to 2. Stand by 3. He hates it. Going to 3. You have to draw it out, 3.
Going on into prayers after this.
Even if you just bring it down slow. 2 set for Jeff. And watch your irises. And go into 2.
Jesus, you are the way, the truth, and the life. John chapter
Okay,
14.
good,
We read
guys.
that today.
So there we go. That was getting through a service there. If you guys have any questions on that, I'd be interested just to know some of the things that we went through there, and then we'll talk about some engineering stuff here. But I want to talk through a few of the little pieces that maybe we saw there. Someone's talking about the jib arm operator voice. Shout out to Jordan there. The jib is something that we added for fun because we had one. We wanted to be able to get some of those shots. When you deal with cameras like that, it's a little bit different. It's something that's tough to do in a live room because you have to have a big enough room to have that crane in there. But one of the things that we're talking about doing in the future is having, if we're going to be streaming, recording the band with a lot of these cameras. We can bring in cameras when there's nobody else in the room to do some fancier things and get those things laid down that then we can use later in the live broadcast. So we have the jib there, and then we had some GoPros. So our camera setup was 3 broadcast cameras. Cameras 1, 2, and 3 are broadcast, and they had that star filter in there, which gives it a nice polished professional look with the star filter on the lights. Camera 4 was an ENG over the shoulder type camera. It was a Panasonic 370. For those of you who are like this stuff, the other first 3 cameras were Panasonic UC 3000. They're 4K broadcast cameras. And then we just had 2 GoPros were on cameras 5 and 6. We thought about attaching some to some guitars. I don't know if we'll do something like that later, but those cameras, we were able to just white balance them to the same color as everything else, and they actually cut in pretty well. They're coming out HDMI, converting them to SDI, then they're actually going fiber optic back to the control room. But that's how our setup was. And you could hear at the one point, the playback operator told me, hey, we're coming to prayers next. We were looking at the jib operator said, hey, just so you know, I'm setting up for the next shot, for the ending shot. Something to work with your camera operators on is when you tell them to stand by, what I typically mean by stand by is keep doing what you're doing. So if you're pulling out slowly and I say stand by, I want you to just keep doing that. I want you to stop and wait. I want you to keep doing that. And then I'm going to go to you. If I want you to reset, I'll say, okay, stand by 1, restart that. And I'll tell you when to go. Go now. Because sometimes I love the shot. I want you to do it, but not quite yet. So go back and wait for me to call you. Then typically as a director, I plan on you staying there until I tell you I'm not going to use it. If you're like, he told me to reset and now it's been a minute and I haven't gone, then the camera operator can ask back and say, hey, do you still want me to stay here? And I may say, yes, I am going to use that. Or nope, I forgot about it. I'm sorry, move on. Typically camera operators aren't talking back. I've been on some shows. It was Garth Brooks and the directors talked nonstop because they've done the show so many times. We had so many conversations. You could hardly hear what direction was going on. Camera operators were talking back and forth, making jokes. It gets to be a bit hectic. Typically, it's the people who need to talk are talking, but it's not just a party line going on with all the camera operators. So that's just part of that's just keeping it professional. And part of it is you've got to be concentrating and knowing what's going on. And you don't want to be sidetracking conversations while you're directing. So something to work on with your camera operators is not to keep the chatter down. Some directors will get pretty upset at that stuff. But one thing we're trying to do here is also teach some skills for our directors, volunteers, and our camera operators. So they may be learning a skill here that they can use. For instance, when we put our cameras in our church, I said, I don't want to spend the most on a camera, but I want to get a camera that they can learn a skill. And now when we do another event, they get called up to run the cameras at the stadium or at the arena for big events. And they say, yeah, I know how to run a camera and I know directing calls. So we're trying to use real world professional commands and calls and stuff so that we're learning a bit of a trade here. Okay. So I'm going to move on to some basic engineering things. We've still got about 25 minutes left. Don't know if I'll go that long, but basic engineering, a waveform. You may have seen these before, but a waveform is a piece in live directing that we're using all the time. And what this does is it measures luminance or brightness values from 0 down here up to 100. And these are measured in IREs. And I don't want to get too detailed on this, but basically black is down here near 0 at 7.5 IREs. And then it used to be that white, you get up near 100 and an old tube TV would start to buzz. So you could never go over 100. That's just spec. Today, it's probably not going to hurt the TV or buzz, although I haven't seen it cut out projectors before, but you don't want to get up over 100. Basically, you want to keep your white levels about like this one is. If I look at the next slide here, we're going to see one where they've gone way too high. So this is way too bright. All right, here's my 100 line. Let me see. You weren't seeing my mouse. Here's my 100 line. Okay, here's 0. Here's 100, and my stuff is clipped way up on the top here. I definitely do not want to have white that loud or that bright. So you may have monitors that the camera operators can see if they're adjusting their own irises, and they may have a waveform. If they don't, and you're looking at buying monitors, maybe look at that as an option. That's a smart thing. Or in a situation, you could get the engineer, or you could have some broadcast monitors in the control room that have the waveform on it. Or Blackmagic makes some smart monitors that have waveforms in it. The Atomos monitors have waveforms in it. Wohler, a lot of broadcast monitors have that little waveform, and I'll stick that down the bottom. So it's something to give you a number and a reference to say, I want to keep all my levels just under 100. So it's not just about the person's eye saying, is that too bright or is that too dark? That could vary a lot based on how bright you have your monitor set. And we'll show it in a second. I do have a video you can watch about how to set up your monitors. So this kind of gives us an objective, just like your audio meters would be, okay? Objective view of your brightness. So this is another thing, white balancing your cameras. I've been watching a lot of people's broadcasts, and one of the things I'm seeing is a lot of different coloring on the cameras. And the most basic coloring for cameras is white balance. And there's a button on your camera. Nearly every camera has it to set the white balance. And just so you understand what's going on there, here's our color temperatures in Kelvin from 2000, which is very warm, very red, up to 8,000. Okay, K. And if we get into big lights, they can go up to 10,000 K. They get really bright. Typically, our sunlight is cooler. It's more of a blue light, even though we think the sun is orange, but the light itself is actually very white or blue. So depending on the lighting in the room, we need to tell our cameras what color temperature they need to be reading. So what we'll do is we'll put a white piece of paper out on the stage, put our main lights on, like for our presenter, and then we'll hit that button and the camera will register. And usually it'll show you what the Kelvin is. Like right now on the camera I'm using, it, for whatever, it's balanced at 5,400 Kelvin. Well, now that I know that, I can white balance the other cameras. I can just do the same white card, or some of them you could dial in and say 5,400 Kelvin. The good thing about white balancing with that little button is every camera may read it a little bit differently, but as long as we have them matching, that's what we want. Okay. So white balance your cameras beforehand. That's a very important piece, and they'll slide after a while and you'll have to re-white balance, but that's how you're going to get the cameras. I've seen somewhere a really warm shot and the next one's almost green or blue. Okay. And that's a simple fix for that. You may not have all the controls to do what we call painting your cameras and adjusting the red and the blue and the green individually, but you should be able to get a good white balance even on the cheaper cameras. So that's something to look for. So those SMPTE bars, okay, that's what this is called, SMPTE. This is a consortium that looks at video standards. And these are the bars, and you've probably seen these and thought they look cool, but had no idea what they did. So these are actual like known colors, okay, that are supposed to have certain values on that waveform. So we see gray says 77 IREs. So in a calibrated system, this should go to 77. This yellow should go to 69. Okay. And the 167 degrees is where it is on the hue. Okay. And we'll look at that in a vector scope. If you look at this, when I put this online, you're going to see this button here, or I have it in the resources. There's a way that you can use these color bars to calibrate your monitors. Even if you just have a desktop monitor, you put these on, you change your monitor to either blue or put a gel in front of it, and you adjust the contrast and the brightness so your monitors actually have the right colors. This last weekend, my engineer asked me, he says, am I looking at your monitors or mine? I said, my monitors aren't calibrated. I'm just using them for reference. Look at your monitors. They've been calibrated. Okay. So this video down here is how to calibrate your monitors. One thing Andrew Metcalf said here is he said, also check most camcorders to make sure your exposure and white balance aren't on auto. They'll reset every time you power on the camera. And they'll also change. Every time the lights change, they're trying to re-white balance. So that's a very good, important point, Andrew. I appreciate that. So make sure that stuff isn't on auto. I want manual control over those things. Okay. So let's take a look at these bars. If I go here and I look at, these are the bars on a waveform. And if I look here, down here, we have this dark blue. Okay. And that's that blue line, right? That's right there. And then I have my almost white. That's this bar right here. When I go to my hot white, you'll see the waveform moves from left to right, just like these bars. There's the hot white. Then we have the yellow in here somewhere. We have the cyan right there and the magenta. When we go over to this other side, this white bar right here, that's represented right there. So that's just kind of show you how this waveform works. And there are different test patterns out there, and you'll have to know where they're supposed to fit here. Okay. So I'm going to show you what one of the things we do. I'll show you a card here coming up that we use. But another scope is called the vector scope. You've probably seen this inside Adobe Premiere or something. The vector scope is measuring your colors. So here's red, magenta, blue, cyan, green, and yellow. So down here we have some of our whites, but this is your color. And as I were to shift my hue on my camera and adjust the color, you can see this wheel spin. So I will take and have all the cameras get on the same shot, and then I'll look and see, are the colors and around about the same spot on this wheel? As long as they're at least lining up the same, my camera should look pretty good going from one camera to the other. Okay. So here, if we take a look, this is our bars. Here's how they look on a waveform, and here's how they look on a vector scope. And let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger for you. I know it may be hard to see, but you could adjust the camera to make sure these dots are lining up in the same spot. And it doesn't necessarily work if you just put bars on the camera. So I'll show you in a second here a card. But also tone. This is another thing that when we're lining up all of our systems, we're going to have the sound guy push through tone. And the tone is a 1 kilohertz sine wave. Okay. And if he pushes that out and he sets his level where he wants it, then I set on my video side coming in the same type of level. Now we can watch those meters and see that we have good audio going all the way through. And if you look here, it says stay in the yellow. We don't want to be too far in the green. We don't want to get in the red. We want to stay in the yellow the whole time. We're going to talk on Friday about audio, but I just wanted to throw that out there as we're talking about a little bit of engineering and testing tools here. So this is something we have, and I wish these were more affordable. They're like, this is a poster that's 2 foot by 3 foot, and it's like $1,200. It's ridiculous. But what I do is I take something like this, and even if you were to make your own, it would probably serve some type of a function like this, but I will put all my cameras zoomed in on this, and then I'll switch from camera 1 to 2, back and forth, 2 to 3, and then I can adjust the colors. Now, maybe those color adjustments are happening in the camera, or maybe you have some software, like if you use vMix or TriCaster, they may have some type of calibration built into them that will help you make those changes in the camera so you can set your color settings. So this poster is so expensive because it is actually color calibrated, and they want you to replace it every couple of years because if the ink fades. But really, if you just had a reference chart that all your cameras could look at and you can compare them to see if they're the same color, that's going to help quite a bit. Okay. If there aren't any other questions, I'm going to go into a few closing thoughts here. The first thing is communicate clearly. The camera people don't always know what you're thinking. When you get a team down, you're going to start to get a rhythm and a groove going on, but someone new, it takes them a bit to kind of get that flow. So make sure you're talking to people all the time. So whether that's the pro presenter person talking or the audio person talking, or you heard in our demonstration there, the camera person was talking to me and telling me what's coming up next. The lighting person will say, hey, this song starts in the dark and then here comes that big hit and all the lights are going to get bright. So maybe be on a wide shot or have your person ready to adjust the irises down. So you've always got to be talking to each other. I was going to say something about communicating clearly. I don't remember the next one. Keep calm. Don't get too excited about this stuff. I like to have that dump off shot that I can go to. Sometimes when I'm directing, I get kind of intense or frustrated. Try to stay as calm as possible. I don't know if you've ever watched, there's some videos about the guys who direct the Super Bowl and the guy's hyperventilating because he's so into the game and he's calling all these camera shots. Keep calm, take a breath when things aren't working. I recommend having, if you really want to do this right, and a lot of this we're talking about best practices, and I understand not everybody's in the same spot, but we want to do the best we can with what we have someone else there who can shake down problems. If there's a problem that happens, it shouldn't be for the director to have to jump off and go fix a problem with a cable. If you have a tech team, have someone whose job it is just to fix problems if something goes wrong. You shouldn't have to be worrying about all that stuff. That's something I learned really early on in directing when I was asked, hey, do you want an A1 and an A2? That's an A1 audio guy doing broadcast audio and an A2, which is an assistant. I'm thinking, why do I need an assistant to the broadcast audio guy? Well, when a microphone fell off a stand, who's going to run out and fix it? I don't want my A1 going and fixing it. I don't want a camera operator jumping off the camera to fix something. I want to send a person out there to fix it. So if you're going to get serious about this stuff, it's really a good idea to have more people than less. More people doing fewer jobs is better than few people doing a lot of jobs. For instance, right now, a lot of folks are saying we don't have a lot of volunteers, but we want to stream. So I got this question the other day, can one person control the PTZ cameras, switch the shots, run the soundboard, and run ProPresenter, make sure it's all streaming? Can one person do it? Yes. Is it going to be done well? Probably not. Are they going to do it for a long time? I don't know. That seems like a nervous situation for burnout for me. Can I control cameras and cut the shots together? Yes. Can I control ProPresenter? Yes. Can another person do sound? Yes. 3 people minimum, you could probably do that. I like to, whenever possible, have more people doing fewer things. On that same note, I like to not have too many people in the rotation. So I want to have 3 camera. If I have 3 cameras, I want 9 camera operators. So once every 3 weeks, you're running camera. Imagine if you were the lead singer and you only got to practice once every 2 months and go on once every 2 months. Well, if you have 8 camera people per position and they only run camera once every 2 months, they don't get a lot of practice. So my directors, my broadcast audio engineers, I maybe only want 2 people, highly dedicated volunteers who are practicing all the time. Before the service practice. Okay. So this last week, we record 2 services a week right now. We hadn't been on in 2 weeks. The first service was pretty rocky. By the second service, we'd found a rhythm. Well, we probably should have been practicing more while the band's practicing, thinking of those shots. The director gets to hear all the songs. As a director, I always want to hear the songs and know what's going to happen. I want to learn the mannerisms of the lead singer. So I know when he walks up, I can take to him and that's not him just faking me out. And then he's going to go back and play again. And I've got a shot of him, or I want to know where that solo is and which guitarist is playing it. So when the guitar solo happens, I don't go to the rhythm guitar and not realize he's not the right guy. And by the time I get a shot there, it's over. So I want to know those songs as much as possible. Sometimes I'll even have a script. I know if you're doing a bigger event, you have a script where you know everything that's going on, where they are on the stage, and probably even what camera you're going to be using. So all that has been worked out in advance, and the director has someone in their head saying, okay, coming up next is this on this camera, and they're talking through that whole piece. So keep calm, make sure you're communicating a lot. Another piece that I like to do if you're training a new camera person is have them come in the back room and see what it's like to direct. A lot of camera operators have no idea what you're going through, and they don't understand what it's like when you look down, you have 3 camera shots of the same thing. They've never experienced that. They think I'm getting the guy talking. So we will often, for the first 2 weeks as a camera person, you stand in the back and you shadow the director and see what they're saying. Now you have some context. Likewise, directors, it's good every once in a while to get in the camera spot and see what they're going through and realize, wow, this director doesn't communicate very well. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. So swap off some roles a bit. That'll help a lot. Always be thinking ahead. What's the next piece? What's going to happen? How am I going to get out of this? How are we going to end the service? How am I going to fade to black? Do I have the buttons in the right spot? Where am I going to do a lower third? Am I going to turn off the lower third? Am I going to do a name badge? Is there someone else coming up? Do I need a wide shot? Do I have a close-up? Have I looked at that shot and does it look good? What are the lights going to do? Is the audio open? So those are some things I'm always thinking ahead. The video guy says, hey, there's video. Okay, audio guy, there's a video coming up. So I'm always communicating as a director, and I'm always thinking ahead. Like I said, the shot I'm on, I'm 3 shots down the road by that point. Okay. Last thing is make sure you thank your volunteers. I've worked some shows where the directors just really seem to treat camera operators quite poorly. It really depends on the show, but thank your volunteers. It can be very stressful when you're trying to direct and you're trying to get these shots and you have a creative vision and maybe they don't quite see that. They don't understand it. I will sometimes show frustration in the sense that, come on, guys, we got to get better on this, but I'm really trying not to put them down. After the end, hey, thanks, great job. Earlier when you were watching that directing bit and the person had the rack focus, hey, great job, excellent job. I want to reaffirm you and let you know when you're doing very well so you'll do it again. And if something doesn't work out, I usually want to try and hit that head on, not in a belittling way or a mean way, but hey, next time we got to be better on that. So in between services, I'll talk to the camera operators and say, hey, we got to work out a system. This happened this last weekend where we had cameras more than once all in the same shot. And in between, I said, hey guys, here's what happened. How are we going to figure this out? Oh, well, we talked. And since we have the jib there, normally we crisscross or we go straight on our shots. We're going to crisscross and he's going to cover this and I'm going to cover that part. I'm like, okay, great. Now you've got a system down. So we will always be talking and in between services be talking and trying to figure out what we can do better. And then work with your camera operators. Get that I consider these tech people a small group. So get that small group together. Let them be able to hang out. Maybe find something you can watch together. If you watch TV, everything is so polished. But if you watch the Grammys, the Oscars, or those they've been doing, some live shows and stuff on TV where they do something that was on Broadway and they do it live. There's a lot more mistakes that way. But you can see kind of the process of what's going on in live directing. Watch some of those things. Watch The Voice or American Idol. Some of those things that are clearly done more live to get some of their tips and tricks. There's also a lot of YouTube videos out there that you can see how people have directed. I think things like what I showed today, we can use that as a training tool to just see what was that process, what was the director seeing. So get that group together, let them share some ideas on how they've done different things with the camera, some things maybe they think of, even how they hold the camera. I've seen people don't get a good shot and they look at how they're holding the camera and they're holding it kind of weird. So try to keep helping people learn their craft. I don't know if there's any other questions here, but I just want to thank everybody for their time. This morning, ChurchNeXt, we did a webinar on lighting with Jeff Cranfill with Special Event Services, and he talked to us about lighting for smaller churches and for larger churches. Tomorrow on Wednesday, Adam and Lee and I will be back for one of our ChurchNeXt webinars. And then Friday, we're going to talk about live audio and broadcast. And I'm guessing it's going to be next week. We're going to talk about cameras, PTZs, DSLR, ENG, broadcast, different camera models and things, if you're interested in that, and different price ranges. And then we'll also have one about video switchers. So there's a lot of video switchers out there, and I see some people making good calls and some calls where it's like, it's a great price point, but I just want to show you some of the caveats of what you're going to get stuck in. Andrew Metcalf also here says Bethel Productions has a great YouTube channel with lots of multi-view recordings from their services. That's very true. Brethel has some great stuff where you get in their control room and see how they behave and how they act, and you can see their multi-view and look at their process. That is an excellent resource. If you guys have any other questions or anything, please feel free to put them in the chat. Also, if you go to our web page where this webcast is, there's a comment section there. Sign up for the newsletter. And I think most of you probably know me, but if you don't have my information, you can always email me, phil@inspirmedia.com, and I'll try to get back to you with any answers. And also the ChurchNeXt.online or ChurchNeXt Facebook group. Be sure to ask your questions there. I want to thank everybody for their time, and everybody take care and good luck.